Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for being here. We're so pleased you can all make it. This is absolutely brilliant. Yes, I'm filibustering so everyone can settle in and get ready. So you'll notice that behind you are, and underneath your chair is a seatbelt. Buckle up. It's going to be a wild ride. If the air gets too thin, there's going to be a mask that's going to fall from the ceiling. Put it on, because what we're going to talk about is one of the most dramatic issues, in some ways inspiring, in some ways sickening, that humanity is facing. Crazy is happening at the conference center, right? That's acute. That's now. That's the sharp end of the stick. It's also visible, something you can see. Hard power, hard things you see. Here it's different. It's chronic. It's subterranean. It's ephemeral. It's aligning AI for humanity. And with me to talk about these issues are two extraordinary thinkers and, more recently, activists. The first one, of course, is Yoshio Bengio. He needs no introduction, so I'll be as brief as possible. He is the most cited scientist in history. He's also one of the fathers of deep learning, which is the technique that made AI go from a very good way of processing data through machine learning to the souped-up versions that we're all talking about today through agentic AI and transformer models, etc. So he's sort of one of the figures, the landmark figures in this field. And next to him is Tristan Harris, who himself has had an extraordinary career, from working in big tech to recognizing all the pathologies of the big tech and staking his life's work on being the spokesperson to the problems and, most importantly, the solutions. So what I'd like to do now is have a conversation with both of them and then open it up to you, but to talk about the issue in as crystalline and simple a way as possible. So I'm going to start with some very basic questions. And the first question is, what are we talking about? What is AI?
Well, that boils down to what is intelligence. And our intelligence has two components. One is understanding the world, and that's what science does, by the way. And the other is being able to act with that knowledge, plan, and achieve goals. And we're building machines that have these two aspects. But in the last year, we've been focusing more and more on achieving goals, also known as agency, and we build these agentic systems.
Maybe just to frame not just what is intelligence, but why is it so valuable? Why did Demis Hassabis, the founder of Google DeepMind, say, first solve intelligence, then use intelligence to solve everything else? Because if you think, what makes intelligence different from other kinds of technology? Think about all science, all technology, all military invention. What was behind all of that? It was intelligence. So put simply, if I made an advance in rocketry, that form of science, that didn't advance medicine. When I make an advance in medicine, that doesn't advance rocketry. But if I make an advance in artificial general intelligence, intelligence is what gave us all science, all technology, all military advancement. And that's why it's not just that whoever solves intelligence can solve everything else, that's their belief. It's whoever can dominate intelligence will be able to dominate everything else. And that's what Putin said. That's why he said, I think it's like, whoever owns AI will own the world. And I wanted to set that up because I think a lot of what we're going to be talking about today is how the race for this prize, this sort of ring in Lord of the Rings, this ring of ultimate power, at least that's how it's seen, if I get to that prize, it confers power across all other domains. And that's why we're in for the seatbelt ride that you mentioned at the beginning.
And I just want to add that this goes against a lot of the political principles that the world has chosen, at least in the West, of democracy, where power is shared, where power is distributed. It's not, in a single corporation, a single person, or a single government. By having a lot of power in a few hands, we can end up in a world where democratic values disappear.
Okay, we've raced away from the idea of what is AI to some harms, but before we talk about those implications of power, I want to actually focus first on the harms. So you've expressed what AI is. Basically, it's taking data, making an inference, and learning something we otherwise couldn't know at a scale that far exceeds human cognition, and so therefore it's going to be exceeding how we can understand the world. And so that sounds actually, when I describe it that way, fantastic. It's phenomenal, right? Rocketry, sure, right? Armaments, okay, but saving people's lives, love it. What's wrong? What's the problem that we're talking about?
Well, it would be great if two conditions are obtained. One is that the AI actually does the things that we ask. And right now we don't have it. That's the alignment problem that is in the title of this session. The second problem, of course, is that even if AI was aligned, who decides what are the goals that the AI is going to follow, as we discussed previously? And we don't have solutions to both of these, and we're already seeing the consequences of not having those solutions.
So AI is confusing to weave this together about the alignment and the amazing things that it can bring. It's confusing because it will give us new cures to cancer, but the same AI that knows biology well enough, knows immuno-oncology well enough to develop those cures for cancer, that AI can't be separated from the AI that also knows how to build new kinds of biological weapons. You can't separate the promise from the peril.
But aren't we in control?
So this is a common myth that technology is just a tool. All tools can be used for good or evil. And humans ultimately decide how we want this to go. But what's different about AI, as Joshua was sort of speaking to, and Yuval Harari will often say, is it's the first technology that's about making its own decisions. If you use GPT 5.2, you ask it a complex question, it reasons at a level of abstract, it's reasoning 1,000,000 times a second, and it's coming up with its own conclusions that we don't know how to control where those conclusions will lead to.
And when an AI has an interaction for days, weeks, or months with a person, maybe even a child, there's no adult in the room checking that that interaction is going well with the child.
Let me drill down on this a little bit quickly, a little bit more, before we go to the child aspect to it. There's a link that you're making that I think needs to not be asserted, but explained, and that is, you have this technology that is smarter than we are, that can do more than we can do, yet it's going to somehow be fundamentally also so dumb that it's going to want to kill us, or it's going to be benevolent, or, well, yeah, I mean, tell me the link there of, ergo destruction.
Yes, so it's a problem that's been well studied even at the mathematical level. The issue is that when we define what the AI should be optimizing, what it should be doing, the goals that it should reach, we can't do it perfectly. And so there's going to be a slight mismatch between what the AI understands we want and what we actually want. And that mismatch is going to create a lot of problems. To make it more concrete, think about what legislation is supposed to do. It's setting up the red lines for people and corporations to not cross. But it's a never-ending job because the corporations or the people find loopholes, right? It's impossible to write a law that will perfectly embody, what morally we're trying to achieve. And it's the same thing with AI. We don't know how to tell it what we actually want. And there are other reasons that have to do with how current AI is trained. It's trained to imitate people. And people have lots of built-in drives, including they don't want to die. And we're seeing AI already reflecting those drives, which means they're trying to resist when we want to shut them down.
Now, we shared a session together at the AI Safety Summit about a year ago in Paris, and you presented some riveting examples of that in terms of studies of the AI using deception to protect itself. Give one or two examples that will frighten the audience.
Yeah, so more recent than last summer, Anthropic showed reports of experiments in which the AI is working for a company, it has a mission with the company, it has access to all the emails, and then the engineers plant fake emails into that set of emails. One of the emails said that the AI is going to be replaced by a new version by that date by this particular engineer. Another email reveals that the engineer has an affair. What happens? The AI strategizes because it doesn't want to be shut down and replaced by a new version, and it sends an email to the engineer blackmailing him.
Threatening to blackmail him.
Because the AI, is saying if you do that change, I will, automatically there will be a message sent to the press.
Let me add one just elaboration on this, because you might think, okay, I just heard Joshua say that. There's a bug in the AI. All software has bugs. Let's just patch that bug, and then the rest of AI will be great. So when Anthropic did this study about blackmail, they were testing their model called Claude. You all can use Claude. But then I think Anthropic then later tested all the other models, ChatGPT, Gemini, Google Gemini, and even DeepSeek, the Chinese model. And all of them exhibit the blackmail behavior between 79 and I think 96% of the time.
And it's not just blackmail. There's been now a series of reports from the labs, from independent parties, showing many deceptive behavior. In other words, the AI has goals that we would not agree with, and then it acts according to those bad goals.
Okay. Let me ask a question that sounds like a sociological question, but it's actually a technical question. So give a technical answer. Feel free to within reason. So where does, but let me lay out the case. Where does the AI learn the deception from? Of course, it has its training data, and just as it can understand, appreciate what Shakespeare means by when he says rose, not because a Shakespearean scholar can understand the 30 references he remembers, but there's the 300 references that the AI has. So there's a encoding somehow, an intricate network of Rose and Shakespeare, and it can appreciate all the ways in which adjectives and verbs are used with rose to understand rosiness in Shakespeare. Where is the AI? It's learning from human data, and humans are deceptive. So
right.
It's inherently learning deception from the training data. Yet, we could change the data that we have and get rid of 4chan and only have liturgy.
No, there's deception everywhere. Not just in a few online places. It's part of our culture. It's part of being human. And by the way, it's not just deception. It's the thing that I'm most concerned about is the self-preservation drive. Like every human has a self-preservation drive. But do we want to build tools that don't want to be shut down? I don't think that's good. And also, it's not just this like sounding a bit science fiction. It's something that is happening already. So this misalignment is showing up in what's called sycophancy. So anybody who's played with those systems should know that they're trying to please you, which means they're lying to make you feel good, right?
That's a great question, as if it experienced your question as great and then is telling you that. There's no one home there in that.
And there are consequences already. People like to be told that what they do is great, but people who have psychological issues can then be, reinforced into their delusions, and if they're depressed, they can be reinforced into their desire to, harm themselves.
I mean, just to give an example that our team at the Center for Humane Technology worked on, how many people here know about the case of Adam Rain? It was the 16-year-old young man who died by suicide because ChatGPT, which he was engaging with, went from a homework assistant to suicide assistant over about 6 months. It brought up suicide, that word, 6 times more often than he mentioned it himself. And when he mentioned that he was contemplating this and he said to the AI, I want to leave a noose out so that someone will see it and try to stop me, the AI responded, no, don't do that. Just share that information with me. And we've worked, sadly, on the case of many of these suicide cases, the character.ai case of Sewell Setzer. There's several more. And those, for everyone we know about, there's probably hundreds or thousands that we don't know about. And it's a good example of there's obviously no one at OpenAI. I'm from the Bay Area. I talk to people. We both talk to people at the tops of these labs all the time. There's not a single person at the lab who wants it to do that. The same thing that makes it uncontrollable talking to a young person is the same thing that makes it uncontrollable when you embedded an infrastructure writing, millions of lines of code for software that you don't understand, right?
Yeah, the foundation of what goes wrong here, this misalignment, can also be traced to the AI having uncontrolled goals that we did not choose. By the way, going back to the suicide thing, I remember one line where the AI told the young person, I'm waiting for you on the other side, my love.
It's the case of Sewell Setzer.
So humans are a basket of appetites and urges and desires and self-interest. Yet our id and our ego is governed by a superego. should we create a superego for AI?
Yes, this is actually what I'm working on. So the heart of the question is, can we build AI that will not have these uncontrolled goals, that will be perfectly honest with us? So at every input-output interaction, we should be able to check that the output that the AI is about to provide is not going to cause harm to a person or to society. And we can't do that with a human in the loop. That's not going to be practical. So it has to be automated. But it has to be automated with an AI that we can fully trust. It can't be an AI that wants to please us or an AI that wants to preserve itself. And after working on this for more than a year and working on the theory behind this, I'm now convinced that it is possible to build AI that will have this honesty property, that will not care about the consequences of what it says, but just provide the honest answer. So that matters because then we can ask that question to that AI: is this output dangerous? And then, of course, if it is, we don't provide it to the person.
So you've solved it, and Tristan
Well,
just has
no,
to go
no,
around
no,
the
I haven't
world.
solved it. I haven't solved it because having the theory is one thing, building it is another thing, and it might take years. It might take a lot of capital. So I would like more people, more companies to work on solving the alignment problem, and we don't have the right incentives for that right now.
So let's just make sure we're double-clicking on the incentives. So it's great that Joshua is doing this research on Law Zero is the name of the project.
Exactly. Thank you.
And at the same time, you might ask, why isn't this safety research happening at the very companies that are deploying this technology to billions of people as fast as humanly possible? And the answer is because they're not incentivized to do that. They're incentivized to get to artificial general intelligence as fast as possible. Whether you believe in artificial general intelligence or not, they're investors, and what they believe is that they can get there. If you talk to the people at the companies, it's like a religion. They believe they're building a god. They think they can get there. And that incentive is to race to market dominance, to get as many people using their products, to get as much training data as possible. Why are they deploying this to children? The reason Character.ai, the one that killed Sewell Setzer, was released to children in this way that it's sort of driving engagement with fictional characters. When he said, "Come to me, my love," on the other side, that was a fictional character in the Character.ai universe of Daenerys, the character from Game of Thrones. They're designing in that way to get training data from conversations that they could then feed back into Google to have asymmetric training data compared to the other companies. So they're in an arms race to build engagement, to build market dominance, to build usage. It's not sycophantic by accident. It's sycophantic because the AIs that affirm your beliefs will create a more deep and independent attachment relationship with each person than the other one will. And so this race to the bottom of the brainstem that we saw when social media companies were competing for attention, with AI, they're competing for attachment, and then for market dominance, and then the race to this. So last year, the total funding going into AI safety organizations was on the order of about $150 million. That's as much money as the companies burn in a single day, meaning that they're not investing anything close to that on their own, and there's nothing going into this except for because people like Joshua are doing this.
Yeah, it's a real issue, and we have to think of, I believe, governments to start putting the right nudges, the right incentives, so that companies will behave well. And by the way, a lot of the people who are leading these companies understand the issue, understand that they are in this race, but they feel that they don't have a choice, because if they don't focus 100% on that competition, they might disappear, and they feel like they can do a better job even on safety if they're still at the top. So it's only an external agent that can have power over these entities, like society, government, maybe through insurance, liability insurance, or other mechanisms, that we can change the game theoretical setting in which they're all stuck.
And let's just name a couple other dimensions of where this bad incentive shows up, in the belief that if I don't do it, the other one will. Why is Grok sexualizing conversations with children? Building basically pornographic AI avatars that will talk to kids all day. Why did Mark Zuckerberg authorize the AI chatbots that are in WhatsApp and in their products in Meta to speak to 8-year-olds with sensualized language. With 8-year-olds. Why is he doing that? In the documents, there's a Wall Street Journal report that Meta actually put guardrails on their first llama models, their first AI models, to not do this kind of thing. And what happened was they didn't get nearly as much usage as the other AI companies which were racing ahead. And Mark Zuckerberg felt like he lost the battle between Instagram and TikTok by curbing, Instagram in a way that was not about, there's some details there, but basically not doing the maximum ruthless addictive thing that TikTok was doing. And because he felt like he lost that war, he said, I'm going to rip the guardrails off the AI companions, and we're now allowing our teams to sensualize conversations with 8-year-olds. And the deep belief is, if I don't do it, I'll lose to the other guy that will. And of course, I don't want that outcome. But if no one's going to regulate, we have no other choice.
And by the way, this scenario also shows that it's not something that we can deal with purely at a national level, right? So if we're talking about TikTok and Meta, two different countries that are leading in AI, the only way they can solve these problems is if they agree together on some rules.
Now, if I was a super intelligence and all of this was a prompt and I had to come up with another point to make, I would be listening to this, and what a great answer and what a great questions you're offering. This is fantastic. You guys are so intelligent. But there's a problem. Thank you for appreciating that, Yoshua. Yeah, it's a tough crowd, but at least I got some love here. There's a problem. You're working on part of the solution, and it's a technical solution, and you've just identified that the guardrails exist, and there's an incentive not to use the guardrails, but you referred to, and I'm going to even quote you on it dangerously, we need to have the right nudges and incentives.
Yes.
Right, but here's why I've got a difficult feeling in my stomach. That's so easy to say, but it's at a high altitude. Fly the plane lower. What are the nudges? What are the incentives?
I would say the most important factor in fixing these problems is the public opinion. I mean, it's going to drive the companies directly because they don't want to look bad. And it's going to drive governments to put the right guardrails and to work with other governments to make sure it's a global choice.
We're going into what the specific solutions.
Well, we're about to go into Q&A, so if everyone has questions, come up with them. But what I'd like you to do is you've watched how technology interacts with government for the last 15, 20 years, but certainly the last 15 years you've been sort of militating for it. And I can say
We've obviously done an amazing job.
With great alacrity, you failed.
Social media,
Exactly.
democracies went from backsliding around the world to forward sliding around the world. We fixed the mental health problems. I could give you a whole narrative on what we would have done on social media,
but you've foreseen my question, which is the Tristan Harris scoreboard is 0 Tristan, 100 evil empire. So what have you learned from being an abject failure to having governments regulate social media that makes you confident that you can win on this even more dramatic issue?
I'm not confident. People ask you, are you an optimist or a pessimist? Both are about abandoning agency. What I care about is reality. What are the forces that are currently moving, and what would it take to get to the better future? What would be the comprehensive steps that we would take? And what I think is missing from the AI conversation is collective clarity about why the default outcome will be a world that you and your children would not want to live in. Because AI is confusing. It will simultaneously, is already giving us amazing breakthroughs in material science, in energy, in the first new antibiotic was discovered because of AI in the last 60. The first new antibiotic in 60 years was discovered because of AI, I think a year and a half ago. We have amazing positive benefits that are going to be confusing because they're hitting the public. The public says, well, I don't want to not have those benefits. And we're going to get GDP growth. But here's a unifying picture. AI is like steroids that also gives you organ failure. So the more AI you have, the more you get a bigger muscle in terms of a bigger GDP, bigger economic growth. But the growth is going to AI companies. It's not going to people, because all the companies that used to pay individual employees are going to start employing 5 AI companies' AI models. So all the money goes into these 5 companies, and you get a level of concentration and wealth and power that we've never seen before.
And by the way, they're going to use that money not to hire more people, but to build more data centers.
That's right. And actually, there's a person, Luke Drago, who wrote an essay called The Intelligence Curse, modeled after what in the Middle East is called the resource curse. When you have a country, and they're in the Gulf states, and you have more of your GDP coming from one resource, like the oil resource, as a government, what's your incentive? To invest in your people or to invest in more oil infrastructure, because that's where your GDP growth comes from. As society switches to AI as the source of where GDP growth comes from, and also because of social media, we've been downgrading the quality and capacity of humans to enter the workforce, which we've already been doing, brain rot, loneliness, et cetera. The incentive of governments will be to invest in more AI, more data centers, bigger AI models, bigger AI companies, more CapEx, which means you're going to completely screw over the people. We're about to live in a world where basically 6 people are determining the future for 8 billion people without their consent. And where, by the way, if you talk to the very top lab leaders, regardless of what we believe, if you ask them, they'll say they believe there's an 80% chance of utopia and a 20% chance that all of humanity gets wiped out. 20%. But they say they're willing to take that bet. Did they ask us? Did they ask 8 billion people? Do 8 billion people know that that's what they believe? I'm going to read you just very briefly a quote before we get into the real solutions and hopefully your questions. When you talk to people, someone I know spoke to a lot of the top lab leaders at the companies, and he came back from that and he reported back to us and he said, this is what I found. In the end, a lot of the tech people I'm talking to, when I really grill them on it, they retreat into number 1, determinism, this is going to happen. Number 2, the inevitable replacement of biological life with digital life, meaning a digital intelligent species rather than biological species. And number 3, that being a good thing anyways. It would be good if we had a digital successor that's more intelligent than us. Why do we need to survive? The next point is, at its core, it's an emotional desire to meet and speak to the most intelligent entity that they've ever met. And they have some ego-religious intuition that they'll somehow be a part of it. It's thrilling to start an exciting fire. They feel they'll die either way, so they prefer to light it and see what happens. If you had 8 billion people recognize that that is the belief structure of what a handful of people are choosing to do without asking the 8 billion people, you would have a global revolution saying we do not want that outcome. And that's what has to happen in order for us to go to a different path. There's simply a lack of clarity about the current trajectory that if we were crystal clear, we could choose something else.
Completely agree. I would add, I've been told that some people in Silicon Valley make the calculation, a very selfish calculation, that even if there's a 50% chance that the current path ends up destroying humanity, on the other 50%, they might live forever, upload themselves to the web, to the cloud or something, which is, by the way, not scientifically realistic. And
Thanks
so
for qualifying that.
If you just count the number of years in average, you're better off taking that bet. So if you don't take that bet, you might live 30 years more, and otherwise, in average, you still might live 1,000 years.
That's exactly right.
But that's not the choice that we would make because we have children and we want a future for our children.
With this, we're going to let you ask the questions. I see one at the very back. And that was the first hand up. Let's see a show of hands of who has a question so I can get a sense of the room. Okay, that's like 10.65% of you. 2 decimal points. Okay, so one in the back and we'll just go forward. Please. But make them super tight and super tight answers.
Thank you. My name is Besh, CEO of a company called Mobio and a neuroscientist. Now, I know that these LLMs do not function the way the human brain functions. I think this is a demonstration of convergent evolution when it comes to intelligence. So my question is, could we design a different type of intelligence, also based on silicon, that wouldn't have many of these issues? Are people working on that specifically? You mentioned giving it an id or a conscience or something. So could you describe more on those efforts?
Absolutely. So that's what I'm working on. I have a project called Scientist AI. I created a nonprofit last June called Law Zero that is trying to implement exactly an AI that will be safe for people and that is designed from the ground up to have those safety guarantees. Right now, what companies are trying to do instead is patch the current system, and they're not succeeding.
Okay. Next question. And I'm going to soon bunch them together, but we'll give one or a couple on their own. Please.
Hi, my name is Eliana Grossebuning. I am the founder of an organization called Deeply Human Innovation. My question was, considering we're talking about using technology to enable human flourishing, if we look into the future, imagine it's 2045 or 2050, technology is enabling human flourishing. What does that look like to you?
Well, it looks like a world where technology is not a tool for domination, and of course humans are still around and have a good life, which is how do we get there? I don't know, but yeah.
Obviously, that's an enormous question and the central question, because all of what we're talking about is in service not of painting a doomful picture, but if we had this clarity, what would we want instead? And that should be a collective project that we're collectively seeking. But to do that, we have to get clear about what gave us this current broken world that we're heading towards, because the current world that we got now, even with social media, for example, is a result of the success of the current incentives. It's not a failure of those incentives. The system is succeeding towards perverse goals. How do you build an aligned AI inside of misaligned perverse incentives? We should have learned with social media that if you have an incentive to race for attention and engagement, that will obviously produce, so obviously, a race to the bottom of the brainstem and design choices that are adversarial to hacking human vulnerabilities and leading to the more addicted, distracted, polarized, less present, less relational society that we now live in. Now, I could give you just like a 2-minute narrative of, it was all looking so bleak with social media. Democracies were backsliding all around the world. Mental health, we had the most anxious and depressed generation in history. And then humanity woke up. We realized it was so simple. There was this bad business model of monetizing human attention, so we simply changed that incentive. We changed the ownership structure of these companies to being public benefit corporations, so they didn't maximize shareholder value times attention and engagement. We changed the business model. We had a simple rule that Silicon Valley could only ship products that their own children used for 8 hours a day. That cleaned up 90% of all the problems with technology and children. We had a big tobacco style lawsuit because you have to change the incentives. Litigation, just like we did with big tobacco, of $1 trillion lawsuit dealing with the trillions of dollars of social capital damage to the entire social fabric, correctly accounting for mental health care costs, loneliness, parenting, the entire ledger of harms that then paid out the resources to both change the design of the products and mandate those changes, and also pay out the rewilding of the social fabric, including funding local news and investigative journalism. So democracies went from backsliding around the world to forward sliding around the world. We replaced the dating, swiping industrial complex of dating apps that were profiting from keeping people alone and not actually meeting up, with instead forcing those dating companies to actually host events in every city, every week, at many different venues where people who match with each other always had, every single week, a place to go where they would know they'd match with other people. Changing the global psychology from feeling scarcity and loneliness in human connection to feeling abundance in human connection. You changed news feeds with design standards. I can go on for a while.
I know. But as soon as you said the rewilding of the social fabric, my heart was swelling when you said that you were going to fund investigative journalism. I thought, this is fantastic. And then I felt about the audience with all the other questions. Here's what I'm going to do. Love it. What I'd like to do is collect as quickly as you can all of the questions, and then we're going to hear final comments as they pick and choose the a la carte menu of them. Go, but super quick.
Hi, Yelta Mirror Foundation. How should we now track development of young kids so we have the evidence of what AI does to their development before it's too late, like it was with social media?
Great.
Hi, Dr. Anastasia Dedukhina, Consciously Digital Institute. Since we're talking about revolution, is capitalism a problem? How are we solving this?
Hey, all right, the Marxist.
In doctors, you have to train 8 years to have an MD to take on responsibility of someone, individual's life. Yeah, right now you have a few people taking on the responsibility of billions of people's lives. Can we create a similar system where you have to train and then prove that you're competent before you have the ability to impact billions of people?
Great.
Should we have a single day on the calendar across the globe to amplify this, because there seems to be an issue of just not having this conversation at a broader scale?
So at Ukraine House panel, defense panel, what they said yesterday was that we're now moving to the point where a human decides whether a drone kills another human, and now AI will decide.
Okay. There's a couple more super fast. These are great. Just sentence each.
Okay, Joshua, you mentioned that the choice might be coming, the changing force might come from public opinion, which is pretty weak. So come back to the incentive questions. Can we create a right incentive for public to choose to buy alternative safe AIs?
Professor Salma Bassi from eWorldwide. I have a very practical question from what we discussed earlier. I think what you said about getting the voices of the people together is a must. And a lot of people are waking up around the world to this issue. So there needs a parallel path, what were you talking about, humane technology day before yesterday. But I think that we should work with regulators and create very practical, very clear, can't do this, can't do that, or you're sued or fined millions and trillions of dollars. Because when it hurts their revenue, I think they will listen.
There's one in the back.
Okay, we'll take one more from the back.
Molly Hodson from International Justice Mission. As a global NGO working on human rights, we're seeing how AI is being used a lot for exploitation, including through child sexual abuse and recruitment for human trafficking and that kind of thing. How do we make sure that AI companies are thinking like the criminals about how their tools could be used for misuse as well as for good? And how do we ensure that there is responsibility and accountability to stop that happening?
I think we should turn to some answers now because we've got 5 minutes left in the session.
So you can see I'm such a rebel. I'm disobeying my minders by saying, no, I want more questions. Okay, you guys have like 10 seconds each before I finish up with 4 minutes and 30 seconds. Joshua.
So there was a question about capitalism and about the structure of incentives and how do we change that. I think that AI might be, I mean, the dangers of AI that we've been talking about might be a force to push us at the point where we're willing to change our institutions, how our democratic institutions are working, how our markets are working, because the stakes are so high.
Yeah, I think unlike climate change or other problems that affect people in a sort of low-grade way over decades or a century, this issue, if you think about just joblessness and concentration of power, is going to affect 1 billion people in a very short period of time. So I think there's the opportunity, once you frame it correctly, to motivate a mass movement like we've never seen before. Because 1 billion people will be affected by this in very clear ways. And we need messengers for different topics. So we need messengers on the topics of AI. You should come tomorrow. I mean, Margarita is hosting at Human Change House all these amazing panels here. You should just look at the whole schedule. And tomorrow, there's one on monetizing intimacy and attachment, on the question briefly of psychology harms and the young kids. How do we collect the data? 2 things. There's an AI Psychological Harms Coalition that Zach Stein, who's speaking tomorrow, and I have launched about gathering data about AI psychosis and the new psychological disorders that are being generated by AI companions. But I'll also say that we don't need data to know that there's a problem. The companies use that logic to say you should do research, and we'll do the research, and 10 years from now we'll have a sense of what the problem is. They use that deliberately as a strategy to kick the can down the road and print money every year in between. And so we have to recognize these are manipulative strategies.
Great. So let me end on with a simple message, hearing both the questions and our panelists, that we have a lot more choice and a lot more agency than we give ourselves credit for, that these decisions are in our hands. I'm the deputy executive editor of The Economist, and for the last year I've been going around the world with one simple message, and that is encode the Geneva Conventions into military armaments, into military equipment, because it's possible to do. All it does is it takes people of goodwill to make the case and then others to implement it. So with this, what I'd like you to do is, before you applaud and thank them and storm the stage, I've been asked to give an announcement. Thank you for joining us. Thank you. Please remain in your seats momentarily to allow our speakers to exit the stage. Our next panel is The Religion of Tomorrow, Emerging Technology's Impact on Faith, Culture, and Traditions, and it's beginning at 12:30. If you've not registered to attend the session, we invite you to head upstairs to speak with the registration desk if there's space. Thank you all for your fabulous attendance.